Oh, hello everyone. Sydney St. James here with you with another great episode of the Sydney St. James Show. We'll be talking about, just talking about anything you can possibly think of. So stay tuned. We're coming up with our next episode of the Sydney St. James Show. Hello everyone. Today I'll be presenting one of the most challenging topics that, over time, I've incorporated into a dozen or more of my novels. The subject matter is forgiveness. How difficult can it be to find forgiveness? I just can't seem to wrap my mind around just how in the world people find forgiveness. How do you let go of grudges? How do you let go of bitterness? And in my writings, I'm always doing this of the character. Someone hurts someone or someone else hurts someone else. So I have to figure out how to get the characters to ask someone for forgiveness and that someone to accept the forgiveness. When someone you really care about hurts you, you can hold on to anger, resentment, and thoughts of revenge. Or you can embrace forgiveness and move forward. But what about those cases where you have hurt someone? The first thing I learned was to admit that you've hurt another person. As painful as it is, you need to come to the place where you accept the fact. Just accept the fact that you're guilty and stop right there. And don't start spouting off all these excuses. Asking someone to forgive you requires a broken heart and a willingness to repair the damage you've done. You know, it's not just saying, forgive me. If you think I've happened to have done something wrong, you need to understand the amount of pain that you've caused and step up to the plate and accept the responsibility for it. This is so true in my novel, Faith 70 times 7. When my grandmother, who was called by God to preach at a very young age of 16 years, lived for 20 some odd years with an alcoholic and an abusive husband. Then, during the turn of the century, she had a place under a large black walnut tree 4 miles outside Mansfield, Louisiana, where she went and asked for forgiveness for the man that almost destroyed their entire family in the early 1900s. Many years separate my grandmother from the early 1900s and my mom, who was dying of cancer and lying in her bed at home, waiting for her time to go to heaven, and all of her family came to visit. This was in 1998. It was a touching moment, to say the least. But there was one person, her sister. The two of them held on to anger and resentment and thoughts of revenge for 15 years. Both were probably the most Christian of women that one would ever want to meet. Both helped so many people in life, yet neither could embrace forgiveness for one another and simply just move forward. Finally, however, after 15 years, she walked into our home only a week before my mom's passing and reached down, hugged her sister, and didn't turn loose for 15 minutes. It's sad, but why wait until the truth of the matter is that a loved one wasn't going to be there much longer? As I said earlier when I started my podcast, I struggle with finding forgiveness, and I continue to struggle either with my characters or with my life. It's difficult. What can I say? Let me give you an example of asking for forgiveness. I walked up to my wife while she was preparing to give childbirth to our first daughter. She hurt so much, and I said that for her to understand. Watching her was giving me just as much pain and probably more. Whoa. If you're a woman and you're listening to this podcast right now, you'd say, beep, or actually maybe some words just a bit stronger. Well, that was very, very wrong for me to say that. I was quickly informed that unless I could carry a child and deliver one, there was no way on earth I could understand the feelings that she was going through. How true can that be? Let me give another example, a bit more difficult for my heart to find forgiveness. I would like to use this example. A woman's watching her husband fall from about the 300th floor window out of the World Trade Center to his death on that tragic day of September 11th. I can't possibly imagine what she's feeling. And I walk up to her and say, "You really must find forgiveness in your heart for that terrorist pilot that flew his plane into the building." Wrong. No way. The same is true with my grandmother, the Reverend Ada Slayton Bonds. When you read the novel from her memoirs, you can't help but ask yourself how she found forgiveness in this world, and how could she have remained married for so many years? I don't think one person is listening out there to my podcast who hasn't been hurt by the actions or words of another. Perhaps a parent constantly criticized you growing up, or a colleague, a fellow worker, sabotaged a project you were working on, or your significant other had an affair. Or maybe you've had a traumatic experience, such as being physically or emotionally abused by someone very, very close to you. These wounds can leave you with lasting feelings of anger and bitterness, even downright vengeance. I've been told by pastors, when asked a question about forgiveness, that if I didn't practice forgiveness, I might be the one who pays most dearly. But, on the other hand, I've been told that I would also be embracing peace, hope, gratitude, and joy by embracing forgiveness. All of the ministers that I've spoken to said for me to consider how forgiveness can lead me down the path of physical and emotional well-being. Something always grabs my way of thinking to find my subject matter for my weekly podcast. For example, I was reading a review about my grandmother and can't repeat the not-so-clean words from the reader. But here C said that my grandmother should have left her husband a year or so after marrying him. They also said they would never forgive him for how cruel he was to them for 20 years. Okay, let's step back for just 1 second. Let's step back and ask ourselves, just what is forgiveness? Forgiveness means different things to different people. Generally, however, it involves letting go of resentment and thoughts of revenge. The act that hurt or offended you might always be with you, but forgiveness can lessen its grip on you and help free you from the control of the person who harmed you. Forgiveness can even lead to feelings of understanding and empathy and compassion for the one who hurt you. Forgiveness. A very, very strong word. It doesn't mean forgetting or excusing the harm done to you or making up with the person who caused the harm. Instead, forgiveness brings a kind of peace that helps you go on with your life. Okay, let's stop right there. You might be sitting there listening and saying, "What is Sydney saying?" Well, I'm saying, go and talk to God. But first, let's have a word from our sponsor that keeps the lights on around this place for my podcasts. And we'll be right back when we talk to God with the rest of my story. Have you heard about Anchor.fm by Spotify? It's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Yep, Anchor has the tools that will allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. Thank you for staying with me. We're back, and we're going to talk to God. When we do, ask Him to forgive you for what you've done and to give you the strength to talk to the person that you've hurt. God is very interested in you seeking forgiveness. Jesus said something compelling about the urgency and the need to seek forgiveness in Matthew 5:24 of the King James Version of the Bible. And Jesus said, "If you enter your place of worship and you're about to make an offering, you suddenly remember a grudge a friend has against you. Well, abandon your offering right then and there and leave immediately and go to this friend and make things right. Then, and only then, come back and work things out with God." I've asked myself 100 times, what are the benefits of forgiving someone? When I was writing the book Faith, 70 times 7, and again when I wrote the book Seeing the Power of God, I kept trying to find an answer. Having written the novel Faith from Ada Slayton Bond's little 15-cent Red Chief notebooks of her memoirs, it is incredible at the number of hours spent trying to understand that simple word, forgiveness. It started with her trying to find forgiveness for her stepmother, and then marrying a man many, many years older than she was when she was only 15. I've talked with so many people about this story, and so many readers who wrote in their reviews and have sent me emails and whatnot and came up to me during some of my book signings. And I talked to them about forgiveness, and I got all sorts of responses. But what I did learn was that letting go of grudges and bitterness can make way for improved health and peace of mind. Forgiveness can lead to healthier relationships, a much better mental health. It can even, believe it or not, lower your blood pressure and improve your self-esteem. Now, let me get back to my mom for just a second and find out why it was so easy for my mother to hold a grudge against her older sister. Being hurt by someone, particularly someone you love and trust, causes anger. It causes sadness. And it causes confusion. If you dwell on hurtful events or situations, grudges filled with resentment and vengeance and hostility, guess what? It can take root. In addition, if you allow negative feelings to crowd out positive feelings, you might find yourself swallowed up by all this bitterness and this sense of injustice. Some people are naturally more forgiving than others, but even if you're a grudge holder, almost anyone can learn to be more compassionate. As I wrote the novel about the first ordained woman of the cloth of the state of Louisiana, I asked myself repeatedly what the effects of holding a grudge are. Here's what I learned. The person that holds the grudge brings anger and bitterness into every relationship and every new experience in life. They become so doggone wrapped up in the wrong that they can't even enjoy the present. They become disheartened or anxious and feels as though life lacks meaning or purpose, or that they are at odds with their spiritual beliefs. To this very day, and I know I've said it once, I still struggle with reaching a state of forgiveness towards someone who has done me harm, either mentally or physically. Forgiveness is a commitment to a personalized process of change, to move from suffering to forgiveness. What can you do? You might recognize the value of forgiveness and how it can improve your life. Identify what needs healing and who needs to be forgiven and for what. And acknowledge your emotions about the harm done to you and how they affect your behavior. And try to find a way to work to release them. Choose to forgive the person who's offended you. And lastly, move away from your position as a victim and release the control and power of the offending person and situation have had in your life. As you let go of grudges, you'll no longer define your life by how you've been hurt. Who knows? You might even find compassion, or you might find understanding. If you're going to meet a person, you may want to write down your apology. Sit down at the table, grab you a notepad, and start practicing what you're going to say and write it down until you are completely comfortable with it. What to say? Well, be honest. Don't apologize just to make an uncomfortable situation go away. You need to clearly explain what you are sorry for without making any excuses. And I said this at the beginning of my podcast. Find a way. To say that you're sorry. And then don't follow it up with a bunch of excuses. You might need to find a third party who can help you, especially if it's difficult to talk face to face. You might need a peacemaker who can help bring some objectivity to the conversation. And it's essential to not expect them to immediately jump up with joy moment you apologize. For years, the big question for me writing Faith was what happens if I can't forgive my grandfather for all the wrong he did towards my grandmother or towards my aunts or uncles. Forgiveness can be challenging. Trust me, I know. Especially if the person who has hurt you doesn't admit any wrongdoing. What if you find yourself stuck, like me? Well, you practice empathy. Try looking at the situation from the other person's point of view. Ask yourself why he or she would behave in such a way. Perhaps, just perhaps, you would have reacted similarly if you had faced the same situation. Also, reflect on times you've hurt others and on those who have forgiven you. Write in your journal, like Ada did for 50 years, and pray or use guided meditation, or talk with a person you found to be wise and compassionate, such as your minister, a mental health provider, or an impartial loved one or friend. And lastly, be aware that forgiveness is a process, and even small hurts may need to be revisited and forgiven over and over. Let me ask you this question. Do you honestly think forgiveness really guarantees reconciliation? If the hurtful event involves someone whose relationship you otherwise value, forgiveness could lead to reconciliation. This isn't always the case, however. Reconciliation might be impossible if the offender has died or is unwilling to communicate with you. In other words, reconciliation might not be appropriate. Still, however, forgiveness is possible, even if reconciliation isn't. What if Ada's husband, my grandfather, the man she continued to ask for forgiveness, never changed? The number one answer given to me by so many people asked this question during the novel's writing. Getting another person to change his or her actions, their behavior, or words isn't the point of forgiveness. Instead, think of forgiveness more about how it can change your life by bringing you peace and happiness and emotional and spiritual healing. Forgiveness can take away the power the other person continues to wield in your life. It really, really can. Lastly, my friends, what if I'm the one who needs forgiveness? I spoke to my retired minister, pastor now living over in Brenham, Texas, of the Presbyterian Church, numerous times when I wrote this novel. He said the first step I've learned through this writing of my grandmother's memoirs was that I should honestly assess and acknowledge the wrongs I've done and how they've affected others. This also meant that I should avoid judging myself too harshly. If you're genuinely sorry for something you've said or done, consider admitting it to those you've harmed. Speak of your sincere sorrow or regret and ask for forgiveness without making excuses. Just do it. Remember, however, you can't force someone to forgive you. Others need to move to forgiveness in their own time. Whatever happens, commit to treating others with compassion and empathy and respect. you may need to give the other person time to sort out their feelings. Don't expect them to immediately jump up with joy the moment you apologize. It's essential, if possible, to make sure the person you have hurt says, "Yes, I do forgive you." In so doing, they're saying, "I'm not going to keep bringing it up or hold what you've done over my head." Sometimes when you seek forgiveness, many people will then turn around and seek forgiveness from you. In my podcast today, I will leave you with 2 questions to think about. My novel Faith 70 times 7 is a true story of the first ordained woman minister in the state of Louisiana. Not only did she live with an abusive husband for 20 years, but she also tried to qualify for ordination in the Cumberland Presbyterian Church for 5 years. You must understand the church in 1915 was 100% dominated by men preachers. Men of the church laughed at her. Women thought she was crazy. Heck, she couldn't even vote. But God called her just like He would anyone else. And Brother Slayton, the older brother of Ada's husband, supported her at the General Assembly in a big debate whether God could call a woman to preach or not. There's no place in the Bible where it says God called her to preach. Ada won her battle, even though she got a slap in the face every time she turned around. But again, read the novel or listen to it in audio. See what you think about her life at the end. Can you find forgiveness for so many people that did her so wrong? Well, I gotta go. I've reached my 30 minutes and it's time to say goodbye. Be sure to stay tuned in for future podcasts and join my channel. Leave some kind words as a review. I appreciate that. Or share my podcast with other friends. Get them to follow as well. Also, a promised first episode that has been held on the back shelf will finally be delivered on the 3rd week of January this year. The making of a musician in the music capital of Texas. Country superstar Dave Henry of the group Dan and Dave. But until then, happy listening. And as always, see you later, alligator. Well, that does it for me for another great episode from Sydney St. James. Be sure to click on the tab above that says send a voice message and I will get it from you and I'll probably play it back on one of my future podcasts. Also, don't forget to click the button follow. I'd love for you to follow my podcast. But it's been fun. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And until next time, here I am, Sydney St. James. Happy listening.